Oh yeah, so first up, we have Zaki. Where are you? There you are. Giving a talk on the unbearable weight of sovereign multi-chain UX. Exciting.
Cool. All right. I guess sort of like the theme of talks from me lately has been UX. And UX has been on my mind because growth is on my mind, both growing Sommelier and the challenges of like onboarding new users, primarily from ETHland into an application. But I've been basically doing a lot, like because of Sommelier and other activities, I've been very much more on like the application side of of Cosmos and the blockchain ecosystem lately. And like what I have become much more aware of is like the incredible challenges of building like a user experience that can like onboard users in any meaningful scale, and how hard these problems are. So just a little talk about, like, this is gonna be a quick talk just about like challenges that I see and like not necessarily proposing solutions, but encouraging people to think about them more. I also would just say that like essentially Cosmos, growth for Cosmos at this point is existential. You know, I would say most of our sort of monthly active user numbers have been flat for the last year. And if we don't change that in the next year, we are not going to be around. So basically the sort of general theme about things that will improve in like the UX in Cosmos is, one, we've had account abstraction through Auth0 in production for, you know, almost 2 years, but like relatively limited uptake. And so like, why is that? What can we do about that? IBC middleware is becoming more and more of a thing. I think like one of the more interesting UX things that recently shipped is Stride doing one-click liquid staking. So like basically you start the liquid staking process, but then all of the subsequent transactions are delegated to the IBC relayer to complete. And then there's this like the magic word of the moment, intense, which I'm mostly not going to make this an intense talk. So what are our challenges? Gas has been like sort of a never-ending challenge for the Cosmos user experience. Most, you know, Kepler recently shipped like making it easier to use alternative gas. Gas UX could be improved. A lot of it is just social coordination, like agreeing on coins that can be used as gas and coordinating all the validators and the and where needs to be governance to support a single gas token. It's still like a complete nightmare to like manage hot and cold wallets. Multisigs are based, like the native Cosmos multisigs are still very like non-native to the ecosystem. Signing multi-step flows where you have to do like deal with like various latencies are a complete nightmare. So like I want to bridge from ETH to from ETH via Axelar to Osmosis and then do something is like you wait 20 minutes and you do step 1, you wait 20 or 30 minutes and then you do step 2, and like it just shocks me that anyone would do this. And then whenever anything fails, like failure and recovery is like an even longer and more complicated process. Like I find it hard, and you know I have the whole architecture of the system in my head. And then privacy is going to make all of this like much, much worse. So it introduced off-chain state, viewing keys. Basically, every Cosmos chain has been running the same staking and distribution implementation. And privacy basically inherently brings us multiple implementations of staking. And generally, like overcoming like the down-only tokenomics of Cosmos involves building multiple implementations of this. So from like a wallet and a dashboard point of view, instead of having like 45, 50 index implementations of exactly the same software, now we're going to start seeing more and more divergence in these systems. And then we don't really know what the practical trade-offs are. Like MetaMask snaps seem to be like one of the most important things happening in Cosmos, but like what are the practical trade-offs between like using a snap and a dedicated wallet like Kepler or Leap? So things that confuse me are like, I don't know why Cosmos wallets don't come with like a built-in bot interface that like, or like first-party bots that come from the wallet providers that just will automate things. Like, I don't know why like YieldMost is a separate thing from Kepler. It probably shouldn't be. I think wallets should charge like monthly fees. I think like the wallet monetization model is so far been basically like pay us as a first-party project to like to get like user reach. I think we need to like definitely be moving more to like where wallets have like direct relationships with their users. And I think I left off the last, but we'll forget that. Then other thing is like session keys. So like one of the other things that we could be doing a lot better in Cosmos is rather than like, you use Stargaze, I'm going to like make a bunch of transactions. Why do I have to like sign with my hardware wallet for every single thing that I did? I just want to bid on NFTs. Like we should be doing more about delegating restricted capabilities to. This is another basic use case of our Auth0 stuff, but like especially in the sense of like privacy-enabled applications as well, right? If we're going to be using like different cryptography, different like that may or may not have ledger support, like how are we going to do that without being able to like delegate restricted functionality to like sort of more short-lived keys? And then finally we have like the sort of meta thesis, which is that like topologies in a single chain world are really hard. Like how do I get from like, I want to use an app that takes, that takes WETH, and I have like a bunch of different liquid staking tokens, a bunch of like other tokens. How do I get there is already really hard because like swapping, pools, liquidities, slippage, depth. Now when you add on top of that like multi-chain UX, this becomes a nightmare. So basically the reason I have been running around intent pilling people is probably multi-chain UX is going to run into fundamental barriers until we get to the point where we have an intent settlement interface like what Anoma is working on. But that generally seems to be like where we eventually go. But I think what we see in like the sort of IBC middleware world is like an early form of intents sort of expressed by stuff like Squid and like the Stride example that I gave before, where like you can delegate work to IBC relayers. We do have searcher markets, like Skip does exist, it does have a searcher market. We do have this IBC relayer market. Like these things do exist and like need to be extended and leveraged to improve UX. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaki. Are there any questions?
Yes. Okay.
So it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about would be addressed with if there was more competition on the wallet side. And I mean, maybe that's not all of the problems, but don't you think, I mean, basically, do you think there's a specific enough effort to give more grants to create more wallets that maybe then compete on these different aspects on the UX side?
I guess to me the question, so like, I guess I didn't, okay, so my question with this is it's like, so wallets have been like the wallets have pursued models where they're like, hey, like we're going to be like a least common denominator over a lot of different things. Like that's basically been the wallet model. But like sovereignty means like a continuous drift away from least common denominator. Like the other example that like is there is like, so like the primary difference between like Evmos and Polaris, which is the bare chain EVM fork, is like Evmos is like, let's have a bunch of Cosmos SDK message type and then have an EVM message type. Polaris is like, there's no Cosmos SDK message types you ever really interact with. You just interact with the EVM. The Cosmos SDK is a layer that sits underneath an EVM for like doing Cosmos-y things. But that means that like the least common denominator among like Kepler wallets, like just like isn't going to work. Like you're not going to be able to see your staking and delegation, and even then you wouldn't be like it's not the standard Cosmos staking module anymore, right? So like I think we have like a real challenge that like is going to have to be explored, which is like what is the right way of even constructing wallets into this world? Because like the answer might just be that there's like a Berachain staking snap, and that's the answer, right? And like the least common denominator, like wallet support all the same thing just like doesn't work. And like the same thing is like how do you get privacy support into Kepler is like sort of like a completely unanswered question.
Hey, Zaki.
Hey.
We've been exploring some cross-chain UX stuff that is salient to this topic, and in particular, we're trying to do like multi-chain flows where we want to make sure that the funds are recoverable in the middle.
Yep.
And one of the things that we're running into is basically alternative key derivation paths on different chains.
Yep.
And the complexity of this just explodes when you get into like the session key world.
Yep.
And I don't know how to kind of square these two. It's really important for multi-chain automation to be able to have user custody across all these different chains, but we're kind of like moving further away from that with.
There are like BIP30, so like HD path thing is this like hierarchy of hashable values, and there's probably like the origin story of this whole subkey thing. Like I will briefly digress and hopefully be like is. Like, once upon a time, the Trezor people and the Ledger people came up with a standard, which they were like, okay, our access control mechanism is like different blockchains will have access to different subtrees in this like giant Merkle tree of like private key values. So you'll have your mnemonic at the top, and then you'll have different subtrees. One thing that like is sort of an interesting question that is like how I think we should probably be doing session keys is basically have like a subtree for session keys, right? And so you could have some sort of local thing that like gets the root of the subtree value on your local device and then passes it into a less secure environment. So you never use that like subtree for like high value key storage, but like you could use that subtree. But like basically it would be like turning the like ledger, like Trezor access control mechanism a little bit on its head, and using it for like non-hardware key storage, and then having like applications that can like, it's always like the general policy should be like we could even have a ledger app that like derives that session subkey and like makes it available to the app. So there's stuff that we could do there. It's like a bunch of coordination overhead. The alternative is just like separate mnemonics for like separate session keys and like long-term storage keys. Good.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Zaki.